Judge Carrafiello, Judge Matthew Carrafiello, it is an honor to have you interviewed today for the Judge's Oral History Project. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
And I am so pleased that you are interviewing me.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm pleased to do it. So, would you tell the viewers where you came from? Are you a native Philadelphian? And if so, where did you grow up?
Well, I'm Philadelphia born and bred, and I'm happy to say when I die, I'm going to be Philadelphia dead.
Okay. A long time from now. Long time from
Well, you know, whenever the good Lord calls, I shall follow.
now.
And I was born in South Philadelphia, and a very nice neighborhood with a lot of interesting people. And I've enjoyed my stay there, and over the years I've moved around 6 blocks from where I was originally born.
So are some of the same families still in the neighborhood that you grew up in?
Not too many.
Okay.
There's been a lot of movement, but there are still a number of individuals that I know by name, and I know by face, and they know me. And it's wonderful to be in a real neighborhood where people still neighbor.
Yes, yes, that is definitely a blessing.
Mm-hmm.
Did you go to school in your neighborhood? Where did you go to elementary school?
I went to A.S. Jenks,
Mhm.
which was approximately 2 blocks from my home. And then I went to Thomas Junior High School, which was around 4 blocks from my home. And then I went to South Philadelphia High School.
So Philadelphia public schools all the way through.
Yes.
Were there extracurricular activities that you participated in high school and junior high school?
Yes, I did. My parents were firm in that I was required to learn music and musical instrument. So I became proficient at the trumpet and the French horn.
Really? I did not know this about you.
In fact, I played at my elementary school graduation, Arrivederci Roma. And I was known for that song for quite a long period of time. And I played in the various bands and orchestras in junior high and high school.
Do you ever pick up a French horn or a trumpet now? If I rode through South Philly, could I hear you?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
Going through college and law school, I had to give it up because I had other things that were taking up my time. But there was one time where my fondest desire was to become a musician. There's only one thing that prevented me from doing that.
And what's that?
Talent.
Judge Carrafiello, you are notoriously humble, so I'll bet you were quite good.
No, I was proficient,
Mhm.
but I would never have been able to become a professional.
Did you, so you did not play at all when you were in college?
No, I didn't.
Where did you go to college?
Temple. Temple University.
And what did you major in?
I majored in political science.
And was that something that did you always intend to major in political science, or were you thinking about majoring in music?
No, I majored in political science because I was thinking about becoming a lawyer.
Okay.
Politics intrigued me, government intrigued me, and the law was always a goal that I wanted to ascribe to.
Now, how did you develop that fascination? Did you have family members in the law or anyone in the neighborhood who mentored you?
No one whatsoever.
Okay.
However, my father was a Bible reading man.
Mhm.
He loved to read the Bible. Every morning before he went to work and he left the house, before 6 o'clock, he would read the Bible. And he loved the Old Testament. And in the Old Testament, the Almighty's preferred method of governing the Israelites was not by a king, but by judges. And I kind of got the idea that judges had to be very special people because they had to solve all the mundane problems. They had to bring a people who had not been manicured, not been completely civilized, under control, and under a very harsh and strict regime. And I felt that this is something I would like to dedicate my life to.
Were you drawn to the story of Solomon? Is Solomon who did it for you?
I've used Solomon very many times in a courtroom.
Mhm.
His wisdom, especially when attempting to solve the problem between the two ladies and the baby and suggesting the baby cut in half, was something that I think all of us who know the story and know the background and depth of it have used to our benefit.
Wow. So your family, you said that your father was a Bible reading man. What did he do? What did he do for a living?
He was a tailor
Mm-hmm.
at Broad and Lehigh.
Okay. Did you learn any tailoring skills from your father?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
No, I've done just about everything else. Tailor in those days would use a 16-pound steam iron. It would be live steam piped in through a conduit, and he would use this all day long. And he had one arm that was twice the size of the other. He told me at a very early age that I would never do what he had to do because it was a good profession in those days, but he wanted better for me.
So he encouraged your education.
Oh, he gave me an ultimatum.
That's encouragement, just very strong encouragement.
Mhm. And the first profession he chose for me was being a pharmacist.
Really?
But then my brother, who worked for a pharmacist, and I did too, when my brother decided he didn't want to be a pharmacist, I kind of changed courses. And he was very happy with that. And it was a lot of support from my father.
How many siblings did you have?
I have a twin sister and a brother. My brother passed some years ago. My twin sister's still with me.
And does she still live in the neighborhood? Are you close in proximity?
Well, she lives around 20 minutes away.
Okay. Yeah. So did she also pursue the law?
No, she didn't.
Okay.
She became a hairstylist.
Mm-hmm.
So she would give me my haircuts, and when I was going through school, besides everything else I would do, she would also hire me to be the janitor for her beauty shop. And that's how I got some extra spending money.
During law school?
Yes.
That's great.
Yeah.
When you were at Temple Law, did you was there a professor or anyone who mentored you?
I was very fortunate because I had one class where my professor was Dick Klein.
Oh wow, that's not so
And
shabby.
We've become friends ever since that, and there's some special type of bond. What a fine man. So he was very, very, very instrumental in my career because I was quite a bit of an introvert in those days. And he was able to help me become a little bit more noisy. So have great fondness for him.
Yeah. So you mentioned being an introvert. I am also an introvert. And is there anything in your experience that, is there anything about being an introvert that you found helpful in your practice of law?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
In the practice of law, it seems endemic that we have individuals who they're full of bull and bluster, and they talk before they think. I was always blessed with the ability to think before I talked.
Yeah.
And I would, because of being an introvert, let my opponents say whatever they wanted to say, at which point, because it was usually said in haste, and because they usually underestimated their opponents, I was able to use some thought, use that extra time to take a higher level. Because the law is not a question of who speaks the loudest, who is the noisiest. It's what the law holds and how it brings people together. So, and that's basically who I am.
It is well known that you are a thoughtful, whip-smart jurist, and you are have always been well respected for those reasons.
Well, one thing my father taught me was carpentry. He was a carpenter, he was an electrician, he was a plumber, he would do everything. And he would do this for the neighbors and friends, and he would do it for anyone. Because he was brought up, and he brought me up, to believe that service to others is why we're all placed on this earth. So he was a really great, handy person. And there's one thing that carpenters do.
What's that?
They measure twice, so they only have to cut once.
Yes, yes.
And that's been a motto that I've had for years, and it comes from my father also.
Well, that's a good lesson to leave the children with.
Yeah. Because, this is what most lawyers don't appreciate. In court, very often you only have one chance. You have one chance to prove a case. And if you don't realize that, you may do your client a great disservice.
Yes. Those are wise words.
Oh, I'm a wise guy.
You are. So, Your Honor, when you graduated from Temple Law, what was your first job out of law school?
My first job was my last job.
Okay, explain.
I ran into a fellow at some type of affair. His name was James DeMarco. He was a lawyer. He was involved in community activities. He was an individual who, in the neighborhood, was greatly involved with any individual who needed assistance. He offered me a position, and I had tried to find a job high and low. I went all over Pennsylvania. This was in 1971, and we were having an economic downturn. So he made me a deal. I could work for him. He would buy me lunch every day and give me $50 a week.
Were you buying big lunches at least?
Unfortunately, the lunches were at a local bistro.
Okay.
And within a year, I was in a hospital with a bummed up stomach.
Oh, no.
Wasn't such a good deal. However, within a couple of years, I was still working for him at a respectable salary. And within a couple more years, we were partners.
Okay.
And we stood partners until the day I rose to the bench.
Wow. Wow.
And I loved the man because the man did not put money. Nothing went above the welfare of his clients.
Mm. That's a good relationship to have.
Yes.
Yeah. Did you do a general practice or did you specialize?
It was general practice.
Okay. Was there a specific area of the law that you were drawn to, that you felt, okay, this is my niche, this is the thing that I'd like to do, even though you were a general practitioner?
No.
Okay.
No, because to me the law was not what I wanted. It's what my clients needed.
Yes.
And there was something special about never knowing what a client's troubles were and what they would need and whether I'd be called into bankruptcy court, federal court, family court.
Mm-hmm.
My clientele, as well as Jimmy DeMarco's clientele, was based upon community needs.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And there was only one thing that the community had in common. Didn't have a lot of money. So if we wanted to make money, we would have done something else for a living.
Right. Right.
But to be able to walk down the street and have the respect of your fellow citizens and people who needed a friend and kind of like a gladiator,
Mm-hmm.
someone to fight their battles
Mhm.
for, was wonderful.
Yeah. Yep. And someone who was willing to fight their battles for them, even though they didn't have lots of money to pay, which is
Yeah.
rare to find. It's rare to find. Yeah.
Yes. Well, they were good days.
Yeah. So you said that until you ascended to the bench, you were partners with Mr. DeMarco.
Yeah.
What were there? When did you become the undersheriff?
Well, around 3 or 4 years after I started my practice, I was contacted by someone I know, very good lawyer. His name was Michael Battellini. And he told me that there was a position that was open because the former undersheriff had committed some ethical faux pas,
Mm-hmm.
and he was going to be dismissed. And I talked it over with Jim, and I said, Jim, I'm thinking about applying for this job. He said, well, you could apply for the job, and you could still work here. You could split your time.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was really nice. After all, there are 24 hours in a day.
Yes.
And it just so happened that the position of undersheriff was on call 24 hours a day. Because the sheriff's office has people on the road all during the day,
Right.
people out. So you have to be able to be in contact. And as opposed to being paid for on-call status, I would be available, take care of the business of the office whenever and wherever needed. And then during the day, when it didn't involve the sheriff's office and in areas that were not a conflict of interest, I would practice law.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it was great. Of course, it took around 12 hours a day. But when you are enjoying what you're doing, you never work a day in your life.
Right.
And I had 2 wonderful jobs.
Mm-hmm. So we were talking a bit before the interview about what people's concept of the sheriff is. Lots of people think of the sheriff as, the guy who wears the big hat in the Western movies. What does a sheriff do, and what did you do as an undersheriff to help with that office?
Well, a lot of people don't know this. In fact, there's a lot of judges and there's a lot of sheriffs who don't know it. Uh, The sheriff is a member of the Unified Judicial District by the Constitution and by the Judicial Code. And the sheriff serves the orders of the court, enforces the edicts of the court. And the sheriff also still has the powers of law enforcement that he or she has had since common law, which means the sheriff has the power to enforce criminal and civil law. And if you look at the city manual, you'll still see the sheriff is the chief law enforcement officer of the county. Now, all these powers are not used all the time, but they're used, and I don't know what they're used today for. The sheriff has, we've had some bad times with the office. Not the deputies. The deputies do a marvelous job. Unfortunately, it's been known that you become the sheriff, you become a person of power. You're an elected official, and you also are a law enforcement officer of some note, and you get away with murder.
But the undersheriff, who is the legal officer.
Well, the undersheriff was not just a legal officer. The undersheriff was the chief merit selection officer in the sheriff's office, the highest ranking merit selection officer, a sworn officer. And my job was, and I worked through 4 sheriffs. I was the undersheriff for 20 years, and I loved it because it was a unique position. I had certain judicial functions. I had supervisory functions. I had legal technical areas that I made decisions on, and I was depended on by very many sheriffs. Out of 4 sheriffs, though, 2 of them were wonderful, and 2 of them considered me to be a threat. I was fired more than one time. I was barricaded in my office at one time.
Oh my goodness.
I was taken, my staff was taken away from me, and all kinds of things happened. And I guess the best compliment I ever received was when I resigned to run for judge. The sheriff at that time vacated the position so that there would be no more undersheriff.
Interesting.
So that he would not have, and that was a reason why there was a civil servant undersheriff, to make sure that the office maintained its level of integrity. Well, no more. And the sheriffs did replace individuals, entitled them undersheriffs, but it was just a name. It was not the same position.
Okay. Were there things that you learned about the fights you had in that office that made you a better judge?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Well, first of all, the typical answer of any bureaucrat is, we can't do that. In fact, we could do things. At one point, the courts initiated a moratorium on sheriff sales.
Mhm.
That moratorium didn't come from the courts. It came from myself and two fine lawyers in community legal service, Henry Summers and George, I forget his name for a second.
Gold?
George Gould,
Mhm.
yes.
Mhm.
And we sat down and we petitioned the court. And this was done probably sometime in the mid-'80s.
And what was this in response to? The
Response to
moratorium?
the great number of unemployed individuals,
Mhm.
homes being lost, equity being lost by individuals. It was a horrible time in Philadelphia's history. And we went to Sheriff Joe Sullivan,
Mhm. Mhm.
who was a really, really wonderful man.
Mhm.
And he could be tough, but tough in a way that you had to admire him.
Yeah.
And we said to him, Sheriff, we want you to back this. And without hesitation, he says, certainly.
Oh.
And we went to the president judge, who was Judge Bradley,
Mhm.
and the moratorium was effectuated.
Okay.
And thousands of people saved their homes.
Wow.
And when the second moratorium came about, that was administered by Judge Rizzo.
Mhm.
There was a blueprint for how to do this.
And you're talking about the mortgage foreclosure diversion program, which
Yes.
I know run. So I owe that to you. Thank you.
No, just doing my job.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah. So tell me, what year, Judge, what year did you ascend to the bench?
1995,
Okay. And what division were you assigned to at that time?
I was assigned to trial division.
Mhm. And you were in civil trial or criminal trial?
Well, I was first assigned to criminal trial.
Mhm.
And it's very funny because everyone thought that because I had a background as the undersheriff that I would be a mean, tough, nasty person. In fact, there was the editorial director of the Daily News who, in his writing, says, when he had to evaluate me, he's firm but fair,
Mhm.
but with a heart.
Yeah.
Because it was known that that's my personality. That's who I am.
Yeah.
People who want to be tough, people who want to be bad, you shouldn't live out your own personality, defects, flaws, whatever, to affect other people.
Mm. Mm.
So I came to the bench. It was a completely new experience. And judging to me was a holy responsibility.
Mhm.
How many people have the opportunity to have individuals who do wrong and are at the crossroads of their life, and you have an opportunity to show them a way, even if it doesn't work,
Right.
but just to show their way. So, to me, I loved criminal court. And I loved it because I realized that I was most effective by not following the routine of being firm and sometimes noisy.
Mhm.
I wouldn't even have I would received a gavel,
Mhm.
and I wouldn't use it on the bench because if I had it on the bench, I would use it.
Right.
I realized I didn't need it.
Yeah.
And for the most part, with some notable exceptions, but very rare exceptions, if you show respect to people, they'll show it back. And with a lot of individuals that come into court, it's a learning experience, showing them that, no, the law is reciprocal. It's meant so that we could all live together and all share and enjoy rights, privileges.
Mhm.
And we can only do that if we judges are showing the right attitude, showing the right respect. We have to lead the way. And we have to make our courtrooms a really humble and fruitful place.
It's so interesting that you just used the word humble, because I was going to say, it seems to me that everything you do begins with humility. That you approach people with humility. I remember calling you as a young judge, as a young lawyer, asking you a question, and I was not. You often worry about being made to feel dumb, that your question isn't smart, but you were always just so gracious and approachable, and I'm thanking you in the middle of this interview for that.
Oh, well.
But that's how you seem to approach everything.
Let me say about humility, I personally have a lot to be humble about. So I'm happy about that. And I've always been pleasured and honored that people would ask me for my advice. And, in the practice of law, we all stand together because the law is difficult, the law changes, and shouldn't take the opportunity to berate each other. We should take the opportunity to uplift everyone as much as we can. And then when the time comes that there is something that must be dealt with, well, we deal with it.
Yes. Yeah. So you also became the administrative judge
Yes.
of Orphans Court.
Mhm.
Now, Orphans Court may sound like a strange name to call a division of the courts, but what does Orphans Court do?
You know, the name Orphans Court came from William Penn himself.
Okay.
William Penn came to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He only stood here a few years.
Mm-hmm.
He had to go back because people were contesting his right to the land grant, and people were out to get him. I think that we all should know just what a marvelous individual William Penn was. The fact that a judge can't tell a jury what their verdict should be comes from William Penn. Because William Penn was on trial for his religious beliefs. And the judge told the jury, find him guilty. And they refused. And the judge locked the jury up.
Really? I was not aware of this.
Well, in England it caused a ruckus. They're not famous for ruckuses. But that's the type of person William Penn was. And when he came to Pennsylvania, he planned the court system besides the other branches of government.
Mm-hmm.
And for the system involving those points of justice that couldn't be managed by the usual civil or criminal court, he invented the Orphans Court. They took that from the name of the Orphans and Widows Courts of London.
Mm-hmm.
So that widows who had no standing in the law under British form of government,
Mm-hmm.
and children who, no matter what they were left, had no rights in seeing that it was properly managed.
Mm-hmm.
He developed Orphans Court to help those that couldn't help themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And It's still here after all these years. The only difference is now we have a plethora of other matters that we handle, but they all have something in common. They all involve matters in which the individual at risk cannot fully represent themselves.
Mhm.
So it's completely different in civil or criminal court.
Mhm. So when you speak of individuals who can't adequately represent themselves, what types of cases? Like guardianships, and what types of cases?
There's guardianships, both of minors and of incapacitated persons.
Mhm.
We handle jurisdiction over corporations
Mhm.
that are charitable in nature. We handle also matters such as like a corpse. Who owns a corpse? Nobody.
Mhm.
Do families hold corpses for ransom? Yeah, yes they do.
Mm.
Um, uh, We handle an awful lot of matters that just people don't realize.
Mm.
Cemeteries. Who keeps cemeteries? Putting that money away for perpetual care.
Mm.
Well, if there weren't a mechanism, then that wouldn't happen. Every time a minor's matter is settled in Philadelphia County, it goes to orphans court
Mhm.
to see that it is done the way the law says it should be. Even though there's a judge, a civil judge that's presided over a matter, even though it's going to a jury. So,
So these are
orphans court
highly
is one.
charged, like emotional, often
Yeah.
highly charged cases.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how long were you in, did you sit in orphans court?
Well, I'm still there.
Yep.
And
You're a senior
I
judge now?
started 2010.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that was under Joe O'Keefe.
Mm-hmm.
And when he retired, I became the administrative judge. And as I reached my retirement age, you know, I eventually became senior judge, and I'm still doing what I love to do.
Is there anything, are there any notable cases that you had in orphans court, or are there any policies that you'd like to speak about that came to fruition under your leadership?
I was administrative judge when same-sex marriages were finally deemed legal.
Mm-hmm.
And that was deemed legal in federal courts.
Mm-hmm.
And Pennsylvania courts decided, well, they were going to accept it. And it seems like it's a pretty simple thing, but it wasn't, because what about the individuals that lived together but couldn't get married? They were refused the ability to get married. Well, there were several petitions filed to have the rights of marriage afforded individuals, even individuals who passed from this life. And I was very, very proud of the fact that I was able to preside over those matters.
Mm-hmm.
And I afforded justice.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody appealed. So that's the law of the land. And of course, whatever you do, you have to look back a number of years before that, in the early 2000s, there was a matter involving domestic partners, which was a ordinance of Philadelphia, in which it was assigned to one judge who felt uncomfortable with the case. So I took the case.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that domestic partners, the bill itself, as well as the concept, was quite legal.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, I was overturned by Superior Court. And I remember I was even lambasted on sports radio.
Sports radio got
Yeah.
into the act, huh?
Oh, yeah. They felt that it was, now, would they do that today? No.
Yeah.
That's how times change. But when it reached the Supreme Court, I was affirmed. So now here, decade later or so, I'm hearing another facet of this. It's all about fairness. And, you know, we're at a stage in our lives, in our country, that we could be fair to each other. It doesn't cost anything.
How this thread has been woven throughout your life.
Well, this happened in another instance. I remember I was in civil motion court for 5 years. And I finally had to get out of civil motion court because I was involved with cases that dealt with either the mayor or administrative officers or administrative bodies, and they were always the same issues. The same people were winning before them, and then when they appealed it before me, they'd be losing in front of me. It didn't look, I wasn't comfortable with it. But before I decided to leave motion court, I had one case that really, really bothered me. It was a library case.
Very famous library case. Can you tell us about?
Yes. The library board decided, well, we are going to redo the central library. And we're going to make it up to date, we're going to make it electronically superior. We're going to do construction, we're going to add to the books, we're going to do everything. But they're going to fund this by closing neighborhood branches. Or the branches that were left are going to replace the librarians with technicians. Now, I happen to be a lover of books. And I also spent a lot of time in libraries when I was a child. And in libraries, I met a lot of other kids. And I also knew that there was a library in my neighborhood where a lot of young people would congregate just to be away from the bullies. Well, when the case came before me, I found that the libraries were, the neighborhood libraries should be kept open. And to the great consternation of the mayor at that time, who from that time to this present still tries to avoid me. But it was the right thing to do. Things like that save lives. You know, I come from a time when, back in the 70s, we had a guy by the name of Benny Swan. And we had gang workers. We had people on the street monitoring what's happening. Now just the opposite's happening. We're hiding from the maelstrom. Children killing children. It's like, we don't want to be involved because it's too big to handle. Well, fortunately, I was able to keep the libraries open. And strange thing happens several decades later, because I'm the administrative judge of Orphans Court, I sit as ex officio on the Jenkins Library.
I was just about to segue into that, yes.
Don't you think the councilman is trying to defund the library, even though the library gives services to pro bono individuals, is open for individuals who have no other source of legal education or reference? He's trying to take that money and give it to the city for use in paying its criminal appointments, which the city is obliged to pay on its own. Fortunately, during that time on the board, we had a new president, very fine lawyer.
I don't remember.
And we also had Judge Chen. We had a number of individuals who were willing to stand up and fight. As judges, we are not permitted to fight, but we gave the support, we gave the voice and the encouragement, and people knew where we stood.
Yeah.
Even the Bar Association backed the plan originally because they didn't know, they didn't understand.
Yeah.
Sometimes knowledge is the most empowering, freeing force that you could give people.
And it's really interesting how your worldview, where you've come from, can affect how you see that problem.
Yes.
I know that Jenkins Law Library, as you said, is a source for, people who might not have any other legal resources to do research. And I'm talking about pro se folks and also solo practitioners who use that
Yes.
library. If you are working at a big firm, it might not occur to you how essential, how vital that is to lawyers who are
Yes.
solos.
Ted Simon, the president, he replaced the former president, who was vigilant. He is he's an international criminal lawyer and the president of Jenkins. Him, Al Dandridge, so many others,
Yeah,
they were valiant.
yeah, it's so
So-
important.
I've been able to be around libraries, and libraries are the center of culture in a neighborhood. Why would you? Well, you know why, because they're defenseless. And in my life, it's always been protecting those that have no one else to defend them.
Yes, yes. And thank you for always standing for people who are voiceless.
Please don't thank me. You know what a joy it's been?
Yeah.
What an honor. How lucky could one person be?
Well, Judge Carrafiello, it has been my absolute honor to know you. You are from that tradition of gentlemen, lawyers / judges, always a gentleman, and I am honored to know you. Thank you for everything you do.
Miss Lisa, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Judge.